probably one of the biggest mistakes people in their early stage, whether they're looking at becoming a key person of influence in their career or whether they're looking at becoming a key person of influence in a business, trying to be all things to all people is probably one of the biggest mistakes in the early stage.
Welcome to Jane Jackson Careers, a podcast that takes your career to the next level. Here's your host, Jane Jackson, author of Amazon Careers bestseller, Navigating Career Crossroads.
Well, hello and welcome back to my Careers podcast, where I interview fascinating professionals who've made amazing career changes. Now, 3 years ago, I attended a 40-week business incubator program and met a charismatic man with huge entrepreneurial spirit. With the help of this program, I've grown my coaching practice, published a best-selling book, Navigating Career Crossroads, and had a lot of fun along the way. So who's this man who inspired me? It's Glen Carlson, the co-founder of Dent Global. They are best known for the award-winning Key Person of Influence program, acknowledged by Inc.com as one of the top personal branding conferences in the world. The media call Glen a small business expert, but he says he's really just standing on the shoulders of giants. So between Dent Global's program mentors and 2,000 plus alumni across the UK, USA, Singapore and Australia, he gets to see firsthand what's working and what's not from the rising stars of business. Dent and Glen now have 40 full-time team members in 12 time zones. In 2014, they became the 9th fastest growing company in Australia. And in 2015, they were awarded the Investors in People Award in London. And they've recently launched their new podcast called, would you believe it, the Dent Podcast. So let's welcome Glen to the show.
Very good to be here. And God, don't those intros make everything just sound so rosy?
Yes, I'm actually a bit out of breath now, Glen. So I'm going to let you start talking for a while.
There should be more of that, talking about the hard work, the struggles, the dark nights of the soul required to actually do all that sort of stuff. But yes, maybe that's some of the finer moments highlighted there. So stoked to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, I've been really excited that you agreed to come on, because you are so hard to get a hold of. You are so busy. You are all over the place. And with all of the Dent Global programs, and, you know, when I did it, it was the Key Person of Influence program, which is amazing. And you've got just so many followers now.
Well, it still is. It still is the Key Person of Influence program. Yeah. It's just now the umbrella brand, now Dent, but still the flagship program is still Key Person of Influence, and that's still a massive part of what we do. But the previous name that we had for our global business was Intrivo. Mm-hmm. No one could pronounce it, spell it, or understood what that meant. So as we evolved as a business, we decided we probably needed a bit of a rebrand. And with the whole, I think Steve Jobs was the first person I ever heard said that it's the role of every entrepreneur to make a dent in the universe. That name really resonated with us, and so now we're trying to bring that to the forefront.
Yeah, and you're certainly making a dent. So now, you know, this podcast is all about people who've made interesting career changes, and you've made quite a lot of changes, and you've done so much really interesting stuff in your career. So how about, to kick us off, let's find out about young Glen. What were your career aspirations when you were just a teeny tiny little one?
I'll tell you what. So 7 years old, right? So I sailed around the world for 7 years with my parents. So we left Australia when I was 7, got back when I was 14. And the first time I can ever remember having a recollection of really wanting to be something when I grew up, we're on a little archipelago called Chagos, which is about 600 miles south of the bottom tip of India, in an archipelago chain called Diego Garcia, which is the US's largest nuclear naval base in the southern hemisphere. And we're on this little deserted atoll in the northern sort of tip of this archipelago chain. And the US military, being the US military, they don't like anyone in their space without keeping some eyes on them. And at sunset every afternoon, they used to send a couple of F-15 Tomcats, which are the same fighter jets that are in the movie Top Gun, which happened to be one of the very few movies we actually had on the boat. We had a VHS player that was bigger than the TV itself. But I must have watched Top Gun, at least 50 times at that point. And so every sunset, these two F-15 Tomcats would fly in so low, like really, really low, map of the land sort of stuff, and they'd come and buzz this archipelago just to check what was going on. And I got used to this rhythm. We were there for a couple of weeks, and so at sunset, I'd be sitting there with the binoculars looking kind of where are they and when are they going to get here. And as soon as I saw these little dots, because they were supersonic, you'd see them before you'd hear them. I'd get on our radio, the VHF, and I'd kind of be like trying to do the Top Gun thing, going, inbound Tomcat, this is sailing vessel Victor Mike 5883, which was our nautical call sign. And they'd contact me back. They'd say,
no way.
Vessel at Chagos, this is inbound Tomcat call sign, I don't know, Viper or whatever he was. We'll be in there in 30 seconds. And he'd come through and they'd buzz us. And then they'd go full afterburner. Their wings would come out first of all to slow down, because that's kind of the way those planes work. They'd slow down, they'd bank hard, they'd wash off all this speed around this archipelago, and then they'd go full afterburner. They'd start going vertical. The wings would go back, and both of these jets would fly straight up, break the sonic boom simultaneously. So we'd be showered in this like colossal kaboom, and from that point, I'm a fighter pilot. That's That was all I wanted to be. So that was where the early aspirations of that kind of stuff came from. Didn't happen. It turns out you needed to be really good at math and you needed to be able to see. And I was pretty blind back then. And laser surgery, which I've now had, wasn't what it is now back then. And so that kind of thwarted the naval aviator career path. But that was the early dream.
Well, how exciting was that? It's got my heart racing already. Yeah. But what a buzz for a 7-year-old to be actually talking to a fighter
Total
pilot.
Buzz.
Oh,
Total buzz.
Amazing. And so, okay, so those were your early career aspirations. And then let's move forward a few years. And then when you actually started your career, what did you start off as?
So my first, where I got paid for doing something was at McDonald's. So I was there for 6. This is when I was 15. I was there for 6 months before they sacked me. They didn't sack me. They politely asked me to leave, or they would sack me. So that was nice of them. And then I got into sales. Sorry, that's not true. I got into boat cleaning. So my first real business was a marine detailing business. So I used to clean boats up on the Sunshine Coast in Australia, where I grew up. Clever name, Glen's Boat Services. So I used to do underwater search and rescue and maintenance and all that sort of stuff for boats. And so I kind of went from making a few $100 a week at McDonald's to a couple of $1,000 a week doing my own business. And so that's kind of where my entrepreneurial light bulb, if you will, went on. But then it was very manual labor. It was a time for money scenario. I didn't really know anything about business. I was studying at university and I finished in the top 2 of the entire university for my business class. And after finishing with that sort of level of achievement, after an entire year of hard work and not having learnt one thing I could apply to my actual business, I dropped out of uni. Dan, my business partner and the author of the book Key Person of Influence, we'd been mates from high school. And at that point, we decided that he was already working for a marketing company down in Melbourne. I decided to wind up Glen's Boat Services and go join this marketing company, which is where I kind of learnt the trade of marketing and sales for about 9 months before we started our first business together, Dan and I, Triumphant Events, where we used to promote authors and speakers. So basically seminars and workshops and promotions and conferences and all that sort of stuff, really helping position those kind of thought leaders in the industry through an events and a marketing model.
Oh, so that was quite an interesting path, wasn't it? But it sounds like you had that entrepreneurial spirit right from the beginning with your marine detailing business, wanting to do something on your own, not wanting to actually draw a salary, but have your own business before linking up with Dan. And this is Daniel Priestley, yes? Yeah,
Dan Priestley, yeah. So, look, I think I probably got it from my dad. My dad's not an entrepreneur. He worked in the Navy and retired from the Navy and has never – it's weird. You wouldn't class him as an entrepreneur, but he's certainly an adventurer. Like, he lives life on his own terms and sailing around the world, freedom, autonomy, adventure, all that kind of stuff didn't exist in McDonald's. And I'm sitting there going, well, this doesn't fit the base plate of how I feel kind of life is, which is if I don't feel like I've got that freedom, autonomy, and capacity for self-expression, I feel rather constricted. And while Dad wasn't the quintessential entrepreneur, he certainly has the entrepreneurial spirit alive in him. I mean, he lives on a yacht sailing around the Philippines and just lives life on his own terms. So I think that's probably where it came from. And I'm not so much of a sailor. I mean, I go out every month or so on Sydney Harbour and we sail around and have a good time, but I'm not a salty dog like my dad is. And so I guess I had to find my own vehicle for life. And while for my dad, his vehicle is a yacht, for me, my vehicle for adventure became business.
Certainly. And with Triumphant Events, how did that grow? Because it evolved into Key Person of Influence, yes?
Yeah, right. So it grew by, I was running some ads in the newspaper, getting people at an event, me picking up the phone afterwards and selling stuff, conferences and workshops and things like that off the back of a talk or a keynote. It's a common model now. We were kind of there at the start of the real boom of that model. The seminar industry stuff about 15 years ago in Australia. There was a lot of sharks, a lot of hooligans, a lot of people ripping and tearing and taking the mickey, real patronizing sort of stuff. So we tried to be different by being really kind of grassroots, pragmatic. The speakers that we got and brought were really credible and had a strong track record. And, we by doing some basic marketing and picking up the phone and not being scared of selling stuff, we did about $1 million revenue in our first year. Most of it was profit, like a really profitable business. We then grew to about 10 million in sales in our third year. So we're doing about 120 events a year in Australia. We then had an opportunity to promote a speaker in the UK who built $3 billion businesses, one after another. He was launching a book, so we helped him do his book launch around the UK. His name was Mike Harris. And so then we were in Australia, we're in the UK. I'm making obviously a long story short, but by promoting all of these authors and speakers and really helping position them in their industry, because while Mike Harris had built $3 billion businesses, he wasn't an author and people didn't know him for that and all that sort of stuff. So there was an element of what we did that helped us take very talented people and help them, get known and recognized in their industry. And what we found was that there are some very consistent principles, because every now and again we'd run an event and it'd be a flop, or we'd pick a speaker and they wouldn't get cut through. It was very hard for us to attract an audience. And, we were running thousands of, person conferences in Andrew Lloyd Webber's Palladium Theatre and, multi-tiered kind of big stuff. So every single week, often every single day, we'd have people, pitching for us to promote them. And, 99 times out of 100, there's just no way that you would, we could work with these people that were wanting us to promote them. And instead of having to have all these conversations, we ended up putting an email template together based on, the questions that we would normally ask to see if it was appropriate for us to promote someone. And, that became the DNA of what became, the book Key Person of Influence and the rest of the business. But it was this concept that they had to have a great pitch. They had to, well, actually, to be fair, at the start, it was just that they had to have a great presentation. They had to be able to, really have a killer 45-minute talk. They had to be really credible in their industry because, you are who Google says you are. And if people Googled a lot of these people, nothing came up, or they had a weird background in some other thing, so there was no credibility there. A lot of them were just selling their time. So, we could put thousands of people in front of them, but we could get them oversubscribed, but they wouldn't have the capacity to deliver. So they needed to have some kind of scalable product. They needed to have a strong profile, which again links back to that credibility. But because we had such a strong database, partnership, celebrity endorsers, all that sort of stuff, we wanted a partner, if we were going to work with someone, that could bring their own joint ventures, partnerships, alliances to the deal. So we ended up putting all that in a piece of paper, and an email, that we'd send people, and thought nothing more of it. For us, it was just a polite way of saying no. That no, we're not going to promote you because we know we'll send you this email and you just can't jump through those hoops. That said, the ones that could were great speakers. They became perfect people for us. And then kind of in parallel at the same time, the barriers were dropping for people to get into business. Facebook was taking off. All these different platforms were occurring. Social media was becoming a thing. Entrepreneurship was starting to get back into vogue. Entrepreneurship used to be a really dirty word with the Christopher Skases and the James Bonds. It was that kind of entrepreneurs were evil bastards. Whereas, we were very much riding the wave of the resurgence of this concept of entrepreneurship. And, now entrepreneur is the new black. It's the cool thing that everybody wants to be. And so when we started having people coming back saying that one email gave me more clarity than ever, and all of a sudden their results and their businesses, and they got to the point where they didn't want us to promote them, because once they worked on these 5 things, pitch, publish, product, profile, partnerships, they got clarity, they built credibility, they built capacity into their business and all this other stuff, their businesses took off, and they weren't looking for an outsider to fix their problems by putting them on stage or something. All of a sudden they were the best-selling author. They were being invited to speak at these other conferences, et cetera, et cetera. And we saw this happening organically, and we thought, wow, that's exciting. And so then we tried a beta version of what is now the 40-week program. It was only 30 weeks then. It wasn't 5 principles, it was 4. And so, we didn't have it perfect at the start. But still, the 20 or so clients that went through that first intake in about late 2010, early 2011, just knocked it out of the park. Not dissimilar to yourself. They wrote books, and they created more scalable products, and they did big deals, and they got strong contracts that were normally outside of their reach, and all this sort of stuff started happening. And that's where we decided, great, we're all in. We're moving out of we're promoting other people business, and we're moving into, we are a business accelerator. We're promoting our own stuff, our own method, and we bring in high net worth men and women that have very successfully developed themselves in each of these 5 areas to work with our clients. And, we wanted to provide something that wasn't around, that if you're a small business owner that was successful, if you're a doctor, a lawyer, a financial planner, a physiotherapist, any sort of service-based business, there was nothing, and there still really isn't a lot of good stuff to be able to help those people build a legitimate business. There was a lot of edutainment. There was a lot of Anthony Robbins-y seminars. There's a lot of, find your dream sort of seminars, but there was no real rigorous business accelerator for service businesses. Plenty of stuff for tech. If you want to build an app and, build another Facebook and all that sort of stuff, lots of people jumping around saying we're running a tech incubator and hackathons and all that kind of stuff. But nothing for the 80% of Australian businesses that are in that service space. And so that's kind of how that pivot happened, I suppose.
Yeah, actually, it's really interesting because your business grew it sounds like so fast, but there was so much work that was put into it. But from 2011 through to when I did the program in 2013 and where you are now at 2016, it's really exponential growth, isn't it? But what's interesting is like you said, there were so many other programs that were more about, I guess, who am I and the meaning of life and self-empowerment. Yeah. But so many, the business owners, the entrepreneurs, what they want are like a step-by-step process of what do I need to do in order to grow my business. And that's what I found the Key Person 100%. Of Influence program was able to do, because it's like, okay, so I perfected my pitch. Took so long to perfect it though, Glenn.
It does.
Because you've got to get just the right
message. It's freaking
message.
Hard work.
Yeah.
It's hard work. And there's so many moving parts that go into a pitch.
Yeah.
It's not just an answer to the question, what do you do? There are so many layers that go into a great pitch. And I think, people are looking for the quick fix. They're looking for the veneer. Veneers don't have cut through. Veneers don't last. Veneers are veneers. A great pitch is built on a depth of value and an understanding of how to synthesize that value. And it takes work. And most people just aren't prepared to put in the work, and so they just keep walking around going, oh well, what do you do? I'm an accountant. And it's like, great, it's never going to get them where they want to go. It's like you put Eric Clapton in an audience of 50,000 people with a guitar that's not in tune, he will clear the room. People that have loved him for 5 decades will start throwing rocks at the guy if his guitar isn't in tune. Whereas you could put an amateur musician with a guitar that is in tune in that same audience, and he's going to get a great response. So musicians know that if your instrument isn't in tune, you do not play it. You don't play in front of an audience. And yet business owners, not even business owners, like, this is a podcast for people in careers. Like, you get what you pitch for. It's absolutely the same. If you don't have a great pitch for you and your career and that progression and why you should be seen as valuable in that career, you're essentially pitching with an out of tune instrument, and you're gonna repel more opportunity than you attract.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy as well, because if you don't know who your target audience are, because so many people when they're talking, they think, oh, if I cast my net really wide, I'll be able to get something. But what you get is not what you really want. So you need to really niche and think who will find me and my skills and what I've got to offer valuable. And you talk to that one person, and that way you're going to capture their attention.
100%. Yeah. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how value is created. The best analogy that I've come across is literally lighting a fire with a magnifying glass, right? So people that refuse to niche and want to be the generalist are just, flying the magnifying glass all over the place because they're like, oh, I want to light this bush and that tree and over there and there's a thing and nothing happens. And they keep doing it and they're putting in all this energy and time and effort and stuff, and they're working so hard, but they're getting no reward out of it. And yet there's this guy with this pissant little teeny tiny magnifying glass out of like a Swiss Army knife that like useless for anything else, and he's just sitting there patiently, not moving all that much. No, this is the bit that I'm focusing on. This is what I'm doing. This is what and all of a sudden it lights up. And now once that little bit is light up, you can move it around and it's a lot easier to light the rest of the world up. But trying to run around being all things to all people before you've got any real depth of traction or influence for one thing is probably one of the biggest mistakes people in their early stage, whether they're looking at becoming a key person of influence in their career or whether they're looking at becoming a key person of influence in a business. Trying to be all things to all people is probably one of the biggest mistakes in the early stage.
Yeah, having that really strong focus, laser-like focus in a way.
Laser focus.
Yeah. Glenn, can you talk us through the 5 Ps, the pitch, the publish, the product, profile, and partnerships? Because now I've gone through the process and the program and I found it so beneficial, even though it was so much hard work. But so pitch we've talked about. What about publish and product?
Yeah, so let me just maybe talk through the 5 problems that they solve first, right? So there's, and let me just say, because there's going to be a mix of listeners here, this is business model agnostic. So I don't care whether you're commercializing your value as a corporate career or whether you're commercializing it in business. That they're just mechanisms for commercializing the value of a human, right? So that's it. People that are frustrated in corporate are frustrated because they don't have influence. People that are frustrated in business are frustrated that they don't have influence. And I see business owners sinking their business and trying to get a career in corporate and they still hate it. And I see people in corporate get out of corporate and get into business and they still hate it because they're going from one vehicle where they have no influence to another vehicle where they have no influence. It's not the business model that matters. It's the influence. It's your ability to affect an outcome that matters. And unfortunately, because there's more competition than everything these days, for every job, for every business, for every section of the market, being great at what you do isn't enough. So as an umbrella concept, that's the core principle. And so if you're great at what you do, continuing to get better at what you do has diminishing returns. There comes a point where a gear needs to shift to focus on solving 5 fundamental problems. And these are the 5 fundamental problems that we find create the most inefficiencies in an individual's ability to both deliver and capture value. Again, whether in corporate or in a career or whether in their business. One is a lack of clarity, right? So that's about pitching. We've talked about that. If you're unclear on your core value, why you're different, why you're unique, why you should get the promotion at a 30% premium than they were expecting to pay versus the other person, or why you shouldn't be poached by or courted at least by 3 or 4, great brands in your industry, or why you shouldn't be able to charge a premium in your own business, like whatever it is. If you don't understand why, then you don't have a pitch, right? And so you need to be able to work through your core value, why you're different, why you're unique, and be able to effectively communicate that. So it's not just your internal understanding of why you're special, but it's your ability to communicate that so other people get it. And so that's the pitching element. But you can have a great pitch, but if you don't have the credibility, this goes to the second point. If you don't have the credibility to back it up, you're not going to get any kind of cut through or traction either. And so there's a few ways to build credibility in your industry. You can be in your industry for 40 years, right? So time and distance tends to build credibility because people start to trust, and by that time you build enough experience, etc. Another way is to do kind of what Mark Zuckerberg did and just build a freaking stonking product with amazing results because of a particular algorithm or whatever. You know, Mark Zuckerberg hasn't written a book. He's doing all right. So you can do it that way and just go all big on some kind of massive result. Unfortunately for me, I'm not a Mark Zuckerberg, Richard Branson kind of guy. I didn't have the $1 billion world-changing idea to build my credibility. I had a lot of skills, talents, expertise that I felt I could offer the world, but so did everyone else. So I needed a mechanism for being able to create some cut through in my own little lunchbox. Publishing is just has always been, since the printing press, the most powerful way to accelerate people's understanding of your credibility. It's you publishing thought leadership. So Dan, my business partner, is prolific on the book side of things. So he's written Key Person of Influence, Oversubscribed, Entrepreneur Revolution. I've very much focused from a publishing perspective on publishing digital content that's been republished, and I've had all these interviews and stuff done, and everything from Forbes to Inc. to GQ magazine. So I've focused on that stuff while Dan's focused on the book. So it's a good sort of team effort. So publishing is a massive step in building credibility as a thought leader. It signals to the industry that you're committed to the industry. It also shares your ideas and your thought leadership with the world, so they can kind of get pre-sold to the idea of wanting to work with you over someone else. So again, starts to create these efficiencies where you're not having to run around hunting and chasing so much. People are already sold on who you are. Quite literally, the other day, a guy came up and he's like, I've listened to 4 or 5 of your podcasts. I've read 3 or 4 of your articles. I love that one with GQ where you're talking about, the philosophy of contribution, and every Australian is already successful just by the luck of being born in Australia. It drives me nuts that people in Australia are, thinking that they're not successful, that, they should see what people are dealing with in India or Africa or China or whatever. And here's this guy coming up already fundamentally talking on the same page that I'm talking on, and I'd never met him before. So there's a lot of power in that publishing step to be able to accelerate the speed of trust. The next problem that I mentioned before is that if people are just selling their time, they have no scalability. So there's an upward limit. There's literally a ceiling on what they can deliver. And so therefore there's a ceiling on the collaborations and partnerships they can do, because another business that has scale is going to look at them and go, well, there's really not much upside in working with you. And so building products and turning a service business into a productized service or a full product business that allows some of that scale to happen, where the business owner doesn't just sell their time. They're able to actually reverse engineer how they can sell a product or a service that doesn't rely on them as the founder, and all of a sudden they have a degree of scalability. Now, scale, and the word scalability is, overused, the Silicon Valley kind of, I'm Uber, I'm scaling my business, sort of thing. But, you can also have scalability as a personal trainer that, JP DeVilliers, one of our clients, went from literally flogging it out 65 hours a week selling his time as a personal trainer to he scaled his business to a 7-figure business where he just does now everything over Skype. He doesn't do physical personal training anymore. He's a speaker for Anthony Robbins. He's an author. And he does coaching over Skype now with top CEOs, etc. He's making 6 times what he used to be making in a third of the time, and now it's all over Skype, so he can do it anywhere in the world. That's also scale, right? So we don't have to be talking about Uber to create a scalable service model. The last two steps kind of build on the first three. Profile is if you're invisible, if you lack cut through in the market, you're just going to be overlooked. And so a big part of this is how you show up on Google. It's super important because any big deal, any big career advancement, people are going to Google you as they're going to Google everybody else. And if you're showing up the same as everybody else online or there's nothing in the media or it's kind of a bit ad hoc, well, you're showing up the same as everybody else. So you're going to command the same income packages. You're going to command the same pricing as other people in business, like whatever it is. Whereas if people Google you, and holy shit, there's a whole bunch of you and your thought leadership and your opinions that are relevant to what it is that you stand for, that, online, in the media, images, videos, content, interviews, third-party stuff, a podcast, all of a sudden people start reshaping roles specifically to be able to fit this package of value, which is you, because now it's not just you as the human being, it's you as an ecosystem, and profile is a powerful way to be able to signal that. So awards, industry, being invited to be at industry events, earned media. So, when I, get asked to be in GQ or Inc. or something, it's the quality of the thought leadership that's earned that right. We work very hard to earn that right. But then there's also owned media, right? There's no filter between me and Facebook. I can put any old stuff up there. So we've all got access to these channels. Key people of influence leverage the channels. Plebs don't. Right? It sounds a bit harsh, but that's the fact. You can just sit there and go, I just want to be judged on the quality of my work. Great. You're essentially a farmhand that is really great at plowing the field by hand. The farmer next door gets a tractor in and you're just like, I don't really care about that tractor. I do good work. I'm just gonna survive by just using my hands and digging in the fields, and it's worked for this long. I'm really proud of my field digging hands. I'm just gonna keep doing like that. The tractor's gonna win, every single time. And so we've got these tools. To not use them is crazy. And the final step is partnership. So joint ventures, partnerships, alliances, collaborations. And the thing about partnerships is that key people of influence do deals with other key people of influence, which is why in the inner circle of your industry, great stuff's happening. It's where the high incomes are made. It's where people are having more fun. Like literally today, this sounds totally egocentric, but it's actually not, right? I'm going out on a boat all day on Sydney Harbour with a bunch of kind of industry leaders, and I'm sitting around and I'm talking to my team and they're just like, yeah, it's a way better use of your time being out having those kind of conversations. Because, me getting caught in the operations and this and that of the business is not where my value is. My value comes in building the relationships that are going to lead to the big deals. And so, after all this work that I've put in, I'm at a point where I am most valuable hanging out on a yacht in Sydney Harbour for a day. That's where the real opportunity comes. And that only comes because of all these other things. The value doesn't come from work. The value comes from influence, collaborations, partnerships, and coming up with ways to do cool shit with existing key people of influence in the industry. And so while it might sound like I'm trying to present this ego thing, I'm not. It's a good life. I live a great life. It's a relaxing life. It's an enjoyable life. It's a fun life. But I'm also building a successful business that's solving a lot of problems as well. And so for a lot of people, I think that that's the balance they're looking for. But it takes the work of doing these 5 things really well before you've laid the foundations to be able to make a day on a boat a very valuable, profitable, meaningful exercise.
Yeah, and I think people have to remember that there's so much work that's involved before you can get to that stage. And certainly you've put in the hard work, the hard yards over the years, and you've worked on the clarity. Well, you've got the clarity for sure, and your credibility. You collaborate with so many businesses, which is wonderful. You've scaled your business too, and everything that you say is so easily transferable into anyone, even if they're in employment, because if they've got a good reputation in employment, they're very much going to be in demand and they will be found. And I think
100%. I mean, especially in Australia, if you look at someone like Bernard Salt, right? Bernard worked, very well respected demographer in Australia. partner at KPMG, but is very much the speaker, the author, the thought leader, the commentator. And do you think he has a different set of rules inside KPMG than any old other partner that doesn't have a profile? 100%. We actually did a whole report called the Faceless Report, which is specifically on how these 5 principles are used inside corporate. And so we've got a whole bunch of case studies in there of executives and corporate leaders and how they're leveraging these 5 principles to build, their personal brands, their reputation, their influence inside an organization. And so, these 5 steps, it doesn't matter whether you're a scientist, an engineer, an employee, an entrepreneur, a business owner, a network marketer, like the vehicle doesn't matter. What matters is your ability to communicate value, have scalable products, be known in your industry, be respected, trusted, and collaboration, all that kind of stuff. That's where the real fun and profit and meaningful impact starts to occur.
And that's what people are looking for. They want to have meaningful work that really gets them going. And I think once you've got that clarity, that's the first thing. What is it that you're doing? What is it that you really want? And how much time and effort are you willingly and easily able to put into it? Because what I've noticed is people who are really passionate about what they do, it actually doesn't matter if you're working 12, 18, 20 hours a day because you love it so much. And if you love what you do, it's not work anyway. So it's how to find that fun factor. You're having so much fun, Glen. Now I'm looking at the time, and I know you've got to get out on this boat. So I want to just squeeze a bit more information out of you before you go, though. What would you say are your top 3 tips for success? What to focus on? Let's be laser-like.
So, well, the things to focus on are those 5 principles, right? But underneath that is you're not going to have the ability to create a better pitch, publish content, create products, all that sort of stuff if you don't have time. We all have the same 24 hours, and yet people continually justify poor performance with the absolutely erroneous excuse of I don't have time. We've got the same time as everyone else, right? There's not equal rights. There's not equal opportunity. There's just not. But there is equal time. It's the one equalizer. And so I think the first thing that people need to do is to make the entrepreneur bet, which is to make a big list of what are all the things you're doing in a month. And, for me and for most people, they're getting so stuck in admin operations. They're doing emails and inbox. They're doing stuff that could be delegated for $20 an hour these days. And so if you don't think you can create more than $20 an hour worth of value, great, do your own inbox. But if you could go out, by going out and doing what you're great at, you could create $100, $200, $500, $1,000 an hour worth of value, then to be doing your own inbox or managing your own admin or sending out your own invoices or doing any of that real low-level grunt work stuff that another human being on the planet could do so much better because that's their zone. If you're doing that stuff, it's just an irresponsible deployment of your own capital. And at some point, far, 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 far later in your life, when you're looking back, you're going to regret it. And so I recommend making a list everywhere from your highest value activities. What's the stuff that brings you to life the most, is most fulfilling, creates the most impact, solves the most problems, and creates the most value? For me, it's around pitching, publishing content, creating better products, raising a profile, and doing partnerships. That's where my value comes from. That's what I can uniquely do that other people can't. And that's where I feel the most rewarded. All of the operational logistics stuff, I find people where that's their thing. They're not about pitching or publishing or whatever. They're about making sure inboxes work really well and systems work really well. And I pay them well for that, because what I make going out and I'm using this sitting on the boat analogy, but doing these 5 things, right? The entrepreneur's bet is that I can make more money sitting on a boat that it costs me to have a business running, doing the stuff that I'm not great at. That's the bet. And I think if people make that bet and they get really serious, and they might start off spending, $50 or $100 a month just delegating some of that lower value stuff, but it gives them the extra 5 or 10 hours a month to focus on, just even if they're just starting to turn that ship ever so slowly and start moving it in a different direction. It's giving them the time, even if they're just using that extra time to go for a bushwalk or a surf or whatever allows their creativity to start moving. If you're filling up your life with low value stuff, you're never going to have the opportunity to focus on the things that'll actually bring meaning and influence and, value to the world. So that's it. One, create a list of high value, low value activities and start delegating everything on your low value. You can use platforms like upwork.com, which are just a fantastic tool for finding freelancers globally. And then once you've done that, follow the 5 principles and, your life and your business will change so fast, it'll make your head spin.
And, I've found that as well, because it's been, 2-3 years since I went through the program, and it's made such a difference because applying those principles has certainly helped me. And I'm loving what I do. I've always loved what I did, but now that credibility in the profile has really increased, and forming new partnerships too. Gosh, that's exciting. Very, very exciting. So Glen, the boat beckons, I know. Let's find out, where can we find you?
Yeah, so you could Google Glen Carlson, and they'll all my
You're
stuff
everywhere.
all my stuff will pop up, and you can then through that find me on the Twitter and the Facebook and all that kind of stuff. You Google Glen Carlson in any of those platforms, and you'll find me. But look, if I've kind of sold you on the idea of these 5 principles, and you want to benchmark yourself, we've worked with 2,000 clients through our accelerators, but we've interviewed tens of thousands of clients, and we've created a benchmarking tool that we call the influence test. It's like a scorecard. If you go to dent.global/scorecard, it's 40 questions. It'll benchmark your ability to influence against those 5 areas that we've talked about. It'll spit out a free 30-page report demonstrating where you're weak, where you're strong, and what are the force multipliers that if you were to focus a bit of time and energy on solving or fixing some of those issues, you'll start seeing some bigger shifts in your business. So you can check that out, dent.global/scorecard. The only other thing would be if you Google Dent Podcast, you'll find my podcast where I interview key people of influence. I deconstruct how they've done it, both clients of ours and some big names in the industry. And that's been a lot of fun as well. I launched that about 6 or so months ago. It's consistently been in the top 100 business podcasts in the world, which is pretty cool. So, if you're picking up what I'm putting down in terms of some of the ideas I'm talking about, there's a few different ways in which you can continue the journey.
Yeah, and the Dent podcast, it's so interesting. I love following it. I've subscribed, and I really enjoy those interviews because it's lots of fun, and I like the way that you do it. So that's great. Well, thank you for all those tips. I will put all of your links on my show notes on janejacksoncoach.com, and I look forward to speaking with you again as the business continues to grow even greater. Now, off you go and enjoy your time on that boat, because it's a sunny Sydney morning.
Beautiful day. I've had so much fun talking to you. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And look, for anybody listening in, if you do feel like you're standing on that mountain of value, like I knew I was standing on all this value. I knew it. I knew I had skills. I knew I had talents. I knew I had expertise. I felt so grateful to be born into a country where, there were no limits to what I could do, and yet I just didn't feel like I was getting that kind of traction. And really, it wasn't until I made this shift, until I got out of my own way, and realized I needed to take responsibility for how I communicated and how I showed up as a leader and an influencer, that everything started to shift for me, and I'm very grateful for that and for that journey. In this conversation, it sounds rosier than it is. There's been a lot of hard work. There's been a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration. But for about the last 5 or 6 years, these 5 principles have been like a bit of a lighthouse that we've been developing in our own business and in my own life. And it's made all the difference. And Jane, hearing you, extol the benefits that you've got from the same methodology, as well as thousands of other people like us both saying the same thing. It's hugely, hugely rewarding. And I just want to thank you for having me on the show and for people taking the time to listen. I appreciate it.
Oh, I've loved talking to you, Glenn. I mean, as I said, you were charismatic in my intro and you're charismatic now. So it's been, I haven't really felt like I've been interviewing you at all. I've just been listening and reabsorbing.
I've just been talking.
yes, you have been
Wind
talking.
me up and let me go.
But
Bang
it's
the cymbals.
but it's
Bang,
just
bang,
so
bang.
interesting because what it is even for me listening now, it's just reminded me of, that's what I really enjoyed. It's always good to have the little additional reminders just to get you going. So thank you so much, Glenn. Bye.
Thanks, Jane.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. You can get a free audiobook download and free 30-day trial at audibletrial.com/Jane Jackson Careers. There are over 180,000 book titles to choose, so give it a go and get your free audiobook today from audibletrial.com/Jane Jackson Careers.
You've been listening to Jane Jackson Careers. Sign up to receive regular career advice at janejacksoncoach.com.